There is a man sitting across from you right now. You cannot see him, but you have felt him your entire life. He shows up at dinner tables, in boardrooms, in the quiet dark of 2 a.m., when you are replaying a conversation that happened 3 weeks ago, still constructing the perfect response you never gave. He shows up in the body of your boss, your partner, your childhood friend who always seemed to say exactly the right thing to make you feel exactly the wrong way. This man is not your enemy. He is your mirror. And what he reflects back at you is the thing you have been running from since the moment you understood what shame felt like. He reflects back the part of you that still needs permission. The part of you that will contort itself into 17 different shapes just to avoid the unbearable experience of being misunderstood. Here is what nobody tells you about that feeling. The tightening in your chest when someone gets you wrong. The heat that rises in your face when an accusation lands. The compulsive, almost physical need to correct the record. That feeling is not honesty. It is not integrity. It is not the righteous fire of a person defending truth. It is a leash. And someone else is holding the end of it. For most of your life, you have lived inside a silent agreement with the world around you. The agreement goes like this. You will explain yourself when questioned. You will justify your choices when challenged. You will offer your reasoning like a supplicant offering bread. Hands open, head down, hoping it is enough. And in exchange for this constant offering, you will receive the thing you crave more than almost anything else. Their approval. But here is the brutal mathematics of that arrangement. The more you explain, the more you owe. The more you justify, the more justification is expected. Every time you open your mouth to defend who you are teaching the people around you that your identity is negotiable, that your worth is up for debate, that the courtroom is always in session and you are always the one on trial. Today, we are going to dismantle that agreement entirely. We are going to go deep into the architecture of power. Real power, not the performative kind. And we are going to examine why the most dangerous people in any room are not the ones who talk the most, argue the hardest, or fight the dirtiest. They are the ones who have mastered something far more rare, far more unnerving, and far more effective. They have mastered the art of not needing to win. This is going to challenge you, because some of what I am about to say will feel wrong. It will feel cold. It will feel like a betrayal of everything you were taught about communication and honesty and being the bigger person. But stay with it, because on the other side of this discomfort is a version of yourself that cannot be rattled, cannot be baited, and cannot be broken. Let us begin with the thing no one wants to say out loud. Think about the last time someone criticized you. Not a gentle suggestion, a real hit. Something designed, consciously or not, to make you feel small. What happened in your body? If you are like most people, there was a sequence. First, a flash of something hot. Anger, maybe, or the sting of injustice. Then, almost immediately, a cascade of mental activity. Your mind began assembling a case, pulling evidence, constructing a timeline, preparing the argument that would conclusively demonstrate that you were right, that the criticism was unfair, that the person delivering it had misunderstood the context, your intentions, the entire situation. And then, if the opportunity presented itself, you delivered that argument, and it probably did not work the way you hoped. Here is why. The architecture of that exchange was never about the facts. It was about the frame. And the moment you began constructing your defense, you accepted the frame that someone else had built. You stepped into their courtroom. You took your place at the defendant's table. And no matter how brilliant your argument, No matter how airtight your logic, a defendant cannot also be a judge. You had already lost the only thing that matters in a power dynamic: your position. Niccolo Machiavelli, writing in the 16th century for a prince who needed to survive in a world of wolves, understood something about power that we have almost entirely forgotten in the age of therapy speak and emotional intelligence workshops. He understood that power is not about being right. It is not about being good. It is not about being understood. Power is about who holds the frame, who sets the terms, who decides what the conversation is actually about. The prince who explains himself to his critics has already surrendered something irretrievable. Not an argument, not a debate. His authority, his mystique. The unspoken implication that his choices require outside validation to be legitimate. Translate that to your daily life. When you explain why you were late, you are saying, "Your opinion of my time management matters enough for me to defend it." When you justify your tone in a heated moment, you are saying, "Your interpretation of my emotions carries the weight of a verdict." When you offer context, history, and good intentions in response to an accusation, you are doing something that feels like honesty, but functions like submission. You are handing a stranger, or a partner, or a colleague, or an enemy, the right to judge you. And once you hand someone that right, they will use it. Not always out of malice, sometimes out of habit, sometimes because you keep offering the gavel. The question is not whether their judgment is fair. The question is, why are you in their courtroom at all? To understand why this is so hard to change, you have to understand where the pattern was written. Go back. Back before you were old enough to have opinions about power dynamics, or psychological sovereignty, or any of the language we are using here. You were small. You were dependent. And the people who held authority over your life, parents, teachers, older siblings, coaches, also held authority over your safety, your comfort, your sense of self. In that world, explanation was not weakness. It was survival. When you were accused of something, and you were a child, in a house where accusation carried consequences, the only available move was to explain yourself clearly enough, convincingly enough, emotionally enough, that the authority figure in front of you would relent, would see your side, would grant you absolution. That mechanism was written into you at a neurological level. It is not a character flaw. It is an adaptation, a very intelligent adaptation for the environment you were in. The problem is, you are not in that environment anymore. But your nervous system does not know that. Your amygdala, that ancient reptilian alarm system in the center of your brain, does not distinguish between a genuinely threatening authority figure and a passive-aggressive coworker who implied your presentation lacked depth. To your nervous system, criticism is criticism. The threat response is the same, and the learned behavior that got you through childhood kicks in automatically. Explain yourself. Make them understand. Restore safety. This is why the urge to defend is not a choice in the moment. It is closer to a reflex. And like all reflexes, the only way to override it is not through willpower in the moment. It is through deliberate, practiced reprogramming before the moment arrives, which is exactly what we are doing right now. Robert Greene, in studying the behavior of those who have mastered power across centuries of human history, observed something consistent among the most formidable figures. They had learned to create distance between stimulus and response, between the attack and the reaction. They had, in other words, learned to pause. That pause is not passive. It is not the absence of a response. It is the most aggressive move available to you in a conflict, and we are going to spend considerable time understanding why. Imagine you are in a room. Across from you, someone has just delivered a verdict about your character. Maybe they called your behavior selfish. Maybe they questioned your competence. Maybe they said something designed specifically to land in the softest, a most vulnerable part of your self-perception. The old version of you would respond immediately. The words would be out before the thought was fully formed. Now imagine you do something different. You hold their gaze, not with aggression, with complete, unreadable stillness. You let the silence settle over the room like a physical thing. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 8 seconds. You breathe. You do not look away. You do not fidget. You do not offer them the comfort of your reaction. Do you know what happens in that silence? The human brain, in the middle of a conflict, cannot tolerate a vacuum. We are wired for reciprocity. When someone attacks, they expect a response. Defensiveness, counterattack, submission, tears. That expectation is not just a preference. It is a psychological requirement. The attacker has set up a social equation, and they need it to balance. They need your reaction to complete the circuit. When you refuse to complete it, the charge goes back into them. Suddenly, they are the one who said something. Suddenly, they are the one sitting with the weight of what they delivered, without the relief of your response to deflect it. They begin to wonder if they went too far. They begin to wonder what your silence means. They begin, often without realizing it, to feel the shame that they intended for you. They will speak first, almost every time, and what they say will almost always be a retreat. I was just saying. You know what I meant. I wasn't trying to attack you. The power has moved, without you saying a word. This is not the silence of the passive. This is not the silence of the person who has been rendered speechless by an attack. This is chosen silence, deliberate, architected, deployed with precision. It is silence as a statement, and the statement is this: what you said is not significant enough to disturb my relationship with myself. That is the most devastating thing you can communicate to someone who is trying to destabilize you. Not that they are wrong, not that you disagree, that they are simply not in the conversation you are having with yourself, that their verdict arrived and found no defendant. Of course, silence alone does not cover every situation. There are contexts where total silence reads as avoidance rather than power. Relationships where you are genuinely invested in the outcome. Professional settings where a complete non-response would create more problems than it solves. Moments where something must be said. In those moments, the question is not whether to speak. It is how to speak without stepping into the defendant's chair. The first principle is this: never push back against force. Pull it. When someone attacks you directly, you are being arrogant, you are being difficult, you never listen. The natural reflexive move is to oppose the force. I am not arrogant, I do listen. This is direct resistance, and direct resistance requires you to accept the premise of the attack long enough to argue against it. You are now operating inside their frame, defending a position they defined. Instead, pull the force. Redirect it. Use the momentum of their attack against the structure of the attack itself and them. You never take anyone else's feelings into account. You. That's an interesting observation. What is it that makes you feel that way? You have done something subtle but profound here. You have acknowledged the content, not agreed with it, acknowledged it. and immediately turn the spotlight back onto them. Now, we are not talking about your character. We are talking about their perception, their feelings, their inner world. You have moved from defendant to curious observer, and the shift in power is immediate and verifiable. This is the verbal equivalent of what martial artists call using your opponent's weight against them. You did not stop the punch. You stepped aside and let the momentum carry them past you. The second principle: agree with the truth, ignore the poison. This one is counterintuitive, and it is perhaps the most powerful move in this entire framework. When someone is attacking you, they almost always embed a small, verifiable truth inside a much larger distortion. They will take something real, a mistake you made, a tendency you have, a moment where you were less than your best, and use it as the foundation for a character assassination. Your job is to extract the truth and discard the assassination completely, without comment. Them. This report is a mess. I honestly don't know how you still have a job. Defensive you. I've been working incredibly hard on this project. There were factors outside my control. The data I was given was incomplete. Machiavellian you. You're right, the report has issues. I'll have a corrected version to you by end of day. Look at what just happened. You conceded the fact. You offered a solution. You completely ignored the existential assault on your competence and your employment. You did not address it. You did not deny it. You did not react to it. And that non-reaction is a statement louder than anything you could have said, because only someone who is deeply secure in their own competence can absorb that kind of attack and respond with that kind of calm. Only someone who does not need this person's approval can hear, "I don't know how you still have a job," and think, "Interesting, I'll fix the report." The attacker wanted to unsettle you. Instead, you demonstrated that your foundation is something they cannot access. This is what it looks like to be untouchable. Not invulnerable. Not unfeeling. Untouchable. There is a difference. Let us go even deeper. Because what we have been talking about so far are techniques, and techniques are useful. But techniques without the underlying structure are a house without a foundation. They will hold in mild weather and collapse under pressure. The underlying structure is this. Every conversation has a hidden architecture, a meta level beneath the words, where real power either concentrates or disperses. At that meta level, there are roles. And the most important role division in any conflict is the one between the judge and the defendant. The judge asks questions. The defendant provides answers. Watch a conversation, any conversation with a power imbalance, and you will see this structure playing out in real time. The person with more power asks more questions. The person with less power does more explaining. Questions create the frame. Answers fill in the frame someone else built. The single most effective way to seize power in a conversation that has been designed to subordinate you is to stop answering questions and start asking them. Not aggressively, not confrontationally, curiously. Them. Why do you always shut down when we try to talk about this? Defensive answer. I don't shut down. I just need time to process. You come at me so intensely that I don't feel safe responding immediately. Power move. What is it about the way I respond that feels like shutting down to you? Do you see the structural difference? In the defensive answer, you are explaining yourself, justifying your behavior, and incidentally blaming them, which will escalate the conflict. In the power move, you have asked them to do the work of articulating their experience. You have become the investigator. They have become the one being studied. And here is the beautiful thing. This move is not manipulative. It is genuinely more useful information. If someone says you shut down, Finding out what that looks like from their perspective is far more productive than defending against the label. You are simultaneously maintaining your psychological sovereignty and gathering real data. This is what emotional intelligence actually looks like when it is not confused with emotional accommodation. Not empathy as submission, empathy as intelligence. Understanding the other person's experience without surrendering your own authority over your self-definition. The phrases that accomplish this most effectively are simple and few. What makes you feel that way? That's an interesting way to see it. I'm curious what's behind that for you. What would that look like to you? These phrases do three things simultaneously. They acknowledge that a perspective exists. They do not validate or accept the content of that perspective. And they return the momentum of the conversation to the other person, keeping you in the position of curious, detached observer rather than reactive defendant. There is a state of being that the most formidable people I have ever studied seem to inhabit naturally. I call it amused mastery. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. It is the posture of someone who is engaged in the drama around them without being captured by it. The parent watching a toddler's tantrum with gentle amusement. The chess grandmaster who sees 7 moves ahead and is therefore untroubled by the loss of a pawn. The person at the party who can navigate the social dynamics of the room because they are observing the game rather than being played by it. Amused mastery is not arrogance. Arrogance is defensive. It is a performance designed to communicate superiority in order to mask insecurity. Amused mastery is the opposite of defensive. It has nothing to prove. It is at rest. When someone attacks you from this state, you are not insulted. You are intrigued. Not because the attack doesn't land, but because you have enough distance from your own ego to find the attack genuinely interesting as data about the attacker. Why is this person so invested in destabilizing me right now? What is happening inside them that requires this? What is the unmet need that is expressing itself as aggression toward me? These questions are not tools for dismissing the other person. They are tools for understanding the full picture of what is actually happening, which is almost never what it appears to be on the surface. When you operate from this state, you naturally produce responses that accomplish something no technique can manufacture artificially: genuine indifference to outcome. And genuine indifference to outcome is the most attractive, most powerful, most unnerving quality a person can possess in a conflict, because the entire leverage of the attack depends on you caring about the outcome. You are being selfish only works if you need to not be seen as selfish. You are incompetent only lands if you need to be seen as competent. The moment you have done the internal work to be genuinely okay with how you are perceived, to have derived your self-concept from inside rather than outside, the attack has nothing to grip. This is not the same as not caring about anything. You can care deeply about your work, your relationships, your growth, your integrity. What you stop caring about is whether any given person, in any given moment, accurately perceives those things. Because their perception is theirs. It belongs to them. It tells you about them. And you are not responsible for managing it. I want to spend some time here, because this is the part that actually matters. Everything else I have given you, the silence, the redirecting questions, the amused mastery. These are structures that can support transformation, but they cannot create it. The transformation has to come from somewhere else. It has to come from confronting your shadow. Carl Jung used this term to describe the parts of ourselves that we cannot accept and therefore cannot see. and therefore project onto the world around us. Your shadow is not your worst qualities. Your shadow is your unacknowledged qualities. The parts of you that you have decided are unacceptable and have buried so deep that you have forgotten they are there. Here is why this matters in the context of power dynamics. The accusations that hit the hardest are always the ones that touch the shadow. The attacks you cannot let go of are the ones that are pointing, however clumsily or maliciously, at something you are secretly afraid is true. If I told you that you have green skin, you would not be rattled. You would not lie awake constructing counter-arguments. You would laugh because you know, beyond any doubt, that you do not have green skin. The accusation has no purchase. But if someone tells you that you are selfish or incompetent, or that you do not really care about the people in your life, and you cannot let it go, that insistence is information. It is pointing at a wound. It is pointing at a place where you have not yet made peace with yourself. The ultimate source of psychological sovereignty is not a technique. It is self-knowledge. Complete, unsparing, compassionate self-knowledge. The willingness to look at yourself honestly, not to confirm your worst fears, but to integrate them. To say, yes, I am capable of selfishness. Yes, there are times when my competence falters. Yes, I sometimes put myself first when I should put others first. And I know this. And I am working on it. And someone pointing it out does not devastate me, because I am not pretending it is not there. When you have integrated your shadow, you become transparent. The arrows pass through. Not because you are invulnerable, but because there is nothing to hide. The person who has nothing to hide has nothing to protect. And the person with nothing to protect cannot be threatened. This is what Machiavelli understood, and what he could not have written explicitly because the princes he was advising would not have tolerated the implications. The deepest source of power is not strategy. It is wholeness. A person who is at peace with all of who they are, the generous and the petty, the brilliant and the inadequate, the loving and the afraid, is a person who cannot be broken by someone else's opinion of them, because their opinion of themselves does not depend on external confirmation. Philosophy without practice is decoration. So let us make this concrete. For the next 30 days, you are going to take on a single discipline. It is simple to understand and difficult to execute. It will show you, in real time, exactly how conditioned you are to seek approval, and it will begin the process of reconditioning. The discipline is this: for 30 days, you do not explain yourself, unless providing the explanation serves a practical purpose, not an emotional purpose, not the purpose of making someone understand you, not the purpose of restoring their good opinion. A practical purpose. You need to convey information that is necessary for a task to be completed or a situation to be resolved. That is the only permitted exception. Everything else, the justifications, the context, the histories, the good intentions, you sit with. You feel the urge to offer them. You let the urge burn, and you say nothing. You will discover, within the first few days, how often you explain yourself in a given day. The number will surprise you. It will be almost constant, because the habit of explanation has been built up over a lifetime of needing to be understood, and it has worked its way into the texture of nearly every interaction. You will also discover what happens to the people around you when you stop explaining. Some of them will become uncomfortable. The dynamic they are used to, the one where they push and you explain, will stop functioning and their discomfort will tell you exactly how much of that dynamic was serving them at your expense. Others will become more respectful, because there is something about a person who holds their own counsel, who does not scramble to justify themselves, who moves through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove. There is something deeply attractive and deeply trustworthy about that person. We do not consciously know why we trust them, but we do. And this is the paradox at the center of everything we have discussed today. The less you need to be understood, the more you will be respected. The less you seek approval, the more you will receive it. The more you protect your inner life from the grasping hands of others' opinions, the more people will be drawn to understand what is inside. Power does not flow toward those who beg for it. It flows toward those who do not seem to need it. Everything I have described, the silence, the redirecting questions, the amused mastery, depends on one thing that cannot be faked: your nonverbal reality. The techniques will fail if your body is telling a different story. If your voice tightens when you deliver the calm redirect. If your eyes dart when you attempt the silence. If your hands grip each other when you say, with studied indifference. That's an interesting perspective. Your body is communicating a message at all times, and that message is more legible to the people around you than any words you choose. They may not be able to articulate what they are reading, but they are reading it. And if your nonverbal message is, "I am terrified right now," but pretending to be calm, the technique becomes theater. And theater, in a power dynamic, is worse than a genuine, unpolished reaction. Because theater signals that you are aware of the game and still losing. This is why the internal work is not a supplement to the external practice. It is the foundation of it. When you have genuinely done the work of integrating your shadow, of locating your self-concept inside rather than outside, of releasing the need for this particular person's particular approval, your body will reflect that. Not because you are performing calm, because you are actually calm. Your breathing will be slower. Your gaze will be steadier. Your voice will carry weight without effort. You will take up space in a room without thinking about it. The stillness will be real, and real stillness is the most communicative thing a human being can produce. People will feel it before they can name it. They will describe you as confident, or grounded, or hard to read. They will find themselves uncertain in your presence because they cannot find the buttons to press. They will reach for your reactions and find nothing, and that absence will be more unnerving than any counterattack you could have delivered. This is what it means to be truly formidable, not aggressive, not dominant in the performative sense. Formidable, immovable, a person whose reality does not depend on the weather of other people's opinions. I want to leave you with an image. There is a tree I have been thinking about since I began writing this. An old tree. The kind that has been standing for long enough that it has stopped being bothered by the wind. Young trees bend dramatically in a storm. They fight the force of it. They contort and thrash and exhaust themselves against something they cannot defeat. Sometimes they snap. Old trees do something different. They move, yes. The branches sway. But the roots, deep, complex, invisible, hold. And because the roots hold, the tree does not need to fight the wind. It can afford to bend. It can afford to let the storm pass through it. It has nothing to prove to the storm. This is the image I want you to carry out of this conversation. Not the image of the warrior who never gets hit. Not the image of the stoic who feels nothing. Oh, the image of the old tree, rooted so deeply in the truth of itself that it can meet any force with something more powerful than resistance. Equanimity. The people who are trying to destabilize you. The critics, the manipulators, the passive-aggressive architects of your discomfort. They are storms. Some of them are enormous storms. Some of them are people you love, which makes them more complicated. But they are all, ultimately, weather. And you are the tree. The work of this life is not to stop the storms. It is to grow the roots, to go deeper into who you actually are, not who you need others to believe you are, until the distance between what they say about you and what you know about yourself is so vast that their words are just sound, just weather, just air. When you reach that place, you will not need silence as a weapon. You will simply be silent because there is nothing worth responding to. You will not need to redirect questions strategically. You will simply be curious because you are genuinely more interested in understanding the world than in defending your place in it. You will not need amused mastery as a technique. You will simply be amused because the gap between where you stand and where people think they can reach you is genuinely funny. You will become, as I said at the beginning, untouchable. Not because you have built higher walls, but because you have gone so deep into your own ground that no one can find the floor. That is the work. It is the hardest kind. Interior, invisible, without applause. But it is the only work that produces something real, something that lasts, something that cannot be argued away or taken from you. The world will keep testing you. It will keep sending storms. It will keep dangling the bait of your own need to be understood. Don't take it. Grow the roots instead, and let the storms discover, one by one, that you are no longer interested in being moved.